I am continuing to read from this book by Nicky Eltz when he interviewed Maria Simma, who had been visited by souls from purgatory for over 4 decades. The book is called Get Us Out of Here. And today I am reading the chapter on what the poor souls told Maria about marriage, family, and children. And this is going to be very important because if you remember, Our Lady at Fatima said to Lucia that the final battle between God and Satan would be for marriage and the family. So let's hear what the poor souls had to say about that topic. Maria, in a marriage where the wife must suffer a lot at the hands of the husband or vice versa, is it all right for one to leave the other? They may, she says, but it is certainly better that they do not. They should offer it all up. But the line one ought to draw is if physical suffering occurs because God chooses martyrs. We do not. What in the spiritual realm might happen more between a couple married in the church and a couple not married in the church, or a couple not married at all? She says, God's blessing, the marriage vows, which are after all vows before God, the marriage mass, and the support of all the family members are all such powerful protective graces that the lack of any one or several of these will certainly seriously weaken its needed strength and unity. In calling on God and his church's blessings, things certainly unfold far stronger and thus happier than without them. Things do happen that are similar to what I see when the poor souls come to visit me, and among the living we would call it bilocation. Or as it also happens that an angel takes on the appearance of the one spouse to bring the other a message. He or she would then see or hear, or both see and hear the other, and thereby receive protective or guiding words. This happens often and must be seen as a wonderful gift from God for a holy couple. It certainly will not happen when people live together in sin. In those cases, there is far less protection from outside of this world. I would caution them very urgently to step away from that and to come back to God's protection. It is also common that a deceased spouse would come close to accompany the still living one through the death process. What a tremendous joy this must be for both to experience. True giving and holy love never, never dies. Yet it is only this when God has blessed the marriage and is always near to them in prayer and in their acts of selfless love. Maria, what have the poor souls said about divorce? They have said it is one of the greatest of all sins against God himself. It hurts everyone tremendously, and of course the innocent ones the most. It is nothing less than spiritual, emotional, and mental murder committed upon God's greatest gift to us, that being our ability to participate in the creation of life and its fruit, our children. No child of divorce will ever grow to the fullness God had planned for it. In this century, millions of times more than ever before, Satan is ripping into the families and the wombs of women, poisoning and cutting to pieces the holy threads that keep families in his plan, poisoning and cutting to pieces the babies God has given them. It is reparation for these two sins that the souls say is coming soon and will be earth-shattering. And in countries such as the USA, where more than 50% of marriages now break up, God will soon arrange for these matters to change quickly. He will step in for the humble, the innocent, prayerful, and loving people, and will punish the others for the never-ending insults against love. The industries, the organizations, the attorneys, the cults, the physicians, the psychologists who lie, confuse, collude, make profits, and thereby distort the truth in order to keep this most horrid of wars going, will soon experience God's wrath as it has never been experienced before. God have mercy on the ones who know what they are doing. And we have the duty to inform the unknowing ones of what they are doing. Maria, have the poor souls ever told you anything about annulments in the church? Yes, they have told me that the church grants far too many annulments today. Such matters must be examined far more thoroughly. I am afraid it is true to some degree that the well-connected and well-endowed have easier access to annulment, and that is hardly God's wish. Of course, there are cases where coercion, emotional limitations, or other situations in place at the time did invalidate the marriage to begin with. But these are serious matters that must be handled very lovingly, but thoroughly as well. What else can you think of that the poor souls communicate to their families? Or they can ask a family member to make something good that the soul itself had done badly or unfairly while here. And by following the instruction, the living ones will be assisting the soul to go on its way. They can warn them to avoid this or that. They protect them, guide them, and convey love and security in various ways. Are there things that the souls will never mention to their families? They will not say or do anything negative or judgmental. It will always be positive, helpful, protective, and thus healing. Are families also visited by deceased relatives who are lost, who have gone to hell, but without the family being attacked or harassed by them? Oh, yes, they are. But then, of course, they do not say what can be done for them because they are beyond all help and all graces. In those cases, they only remind them of their own condition and of the existence of hell. Have the poor souls said anything about the women's movement? No, not in those terms, except that no women should be around the altar. In the secular world, it is quite all right that they compete with men on an equal basis. Having their own careers is fine, but only as long as the family is not in any way ignored. Here, too, both women and men commit many great sins today. If either the children or the spouse are in any way neglected, the other one will have to suffer a lot for it later. This is most definitely a serious and most divisive sin. Have the poor souls ever mentioned what modern society tends to do so often with its grandparents? Here I mean pushing them out of the home and into so-called nursing homes where they are often, at the very least, just treated as another number, and at its worst, where they are often drugged into oblivion and death. Maria says, not specifically, but do sins of such an enormity need any clarification? These are enormous sins. How very often it is the grandparents who teach the youngest to pray, and how often are the generational differences bridged so beautifully because grandparents are there to share the wisdom they gained through many years of experience. Kicking them out of their homes is only Satan's doing. Is it a sin, Maria, for a mother to not breastfeed or hold her child? If she is physically capable of breastfeeding and chooses not to for some self-serving reason, then yes, it is. And not holding a child also stunts it emotionally later in life and is thus, of course, also a sin. Is it better to be poor with many children or wealthy with only one or two? Never may we interfere, Maria says, with God's plan in giving us children, and he will always supply plenty for those in his plan. I know far more truly happy people among the poor than I do among the wealthy, and I know plenty of both. The wealthy are also far more burdened with the effects of their ancestors' sins. More wealthy people come to me for help in this regard than do the poor. And this is not because the poor cannot reach me. They also come. Maria, yeah, most of the world governments, as the meetings in Cairo just recently showed us, speak, however, of the serious threat of overpopulation. What do you respond to this? This is selfish and misguided nonsense, and again, entirely orchestrated by those same banks. Of the approximately 6 billion on Earth today, there's 8 billion today, it is true that about a third are starving, but that is only because of the greed of a few. There are statistics available that prove that the world could feed 50 billion or more if the energy and food were only distributed justly. The West's greed angers God greatly, and he will do something about this very soon, I am sure. I know he will. Who is it whose baby consumes 90 times as much as a baby does in India? And who is it who worries so much about overpopulation? The answers to both of these questions are the same: the West and its banks. Greed and the misguided fear of poverty make people believe, say, and act out of great falsehoods. At what age is it all right for a mother to leave her child for any length of time with a non-family member? Well, this will depend, of course, somewhat on the exact circumstances, but as a rule, it is a sin to do so before the age of 4. The wounds incurred before that age are the most difficult to heal because they're so very far down in the subconscious. Have the souls said anything about physical punishment upon children? Oh, yes, they have. And it is here that I was attacked by Germany's Der Spiegel magazine a couple years ago. They said that I supported beating children. That was a lie. The poor souls have said that a spanking or a slap is necessary and good when it is with a very stubborn and disobedient young child. A small slap is not harmful and will be forgotten on the conscious level very quickly. But the consequences of its stubbornness will be remembered deep down in its subconscious for a very long time. Of course, this should only be done very sparingly, but if one does not do that and then waits until the child is older, it will be too late, and you will suffer at the hands of your children. An older child remembering in its subconscious that a slap came when it was only 2, 3, or 4 will later on only need a particular look from the parent to act correctly. Many parents of today have already learned what fruits their overdone tolerance has produced. Physical violence in the home is a huge sin against love, but carefully placed physical discipline is a God-given necessity at appropriate ages and times. Maria, does the same sin committed against a child weigh more heavily than it does against an adult? Oh, yes, certainly very much so. Sins against a child, if not repaired very quickly and carefully, will later on be repeated by the child as being acceptable and normal. This because the parental role model is so powerful and deeply seated. A divorce or one act of violence, of dishonesty, or of fidelity, of slander, whatever, can so easily cause a chain reaction of the same among the descendants. Being a parent is so much more serious than modern society tends to realize. People far too easily delegate these matters to so-called professionals who do not have the God-given bonds to the children as the parents do, even if the latter make a few mistakes, as all humans do. Do mentally retarded children spend any time in purgatory? Yes, they do, but of course it's much lighter than that of healthy children. It all depends on what the child could understand.